Canada is absolutely furious at Donald Trump. What else is new? But specifically how he conducted himself at the G7. Look, Canada went on to have a very successful G7 with its other allies across the world. But what Donald Trump did in Alberta, I think is unforgivable. And I think our Midas Maple Canadian followers here at the MeidasTouch Network would agree. So after Donald Trump, like the pathetic, vile child that he is, fled Alberta to go back to his safe space, his little bunker in Washington, D.C., what did Donald Trump say to the press on the flight as he was heading back to D.C.? He once again used the 51st state rhetoric. And then he talked about how he wants to now charge Canada $71 billion for the Iron Dome that no one even really knows what the hell they're even talking about with the Iron Dome. And Secretary of Defense, former Fox host Pete Hegseth can't even articulate what the hell they're talking about. And then so Donald Trump increased the price that he's threatening Canada that they need to pay from $61 billion to $71 billion in this ridiculous presser that he had on Air Force One as he fled the G7 to head back to his safe space. Here, listen to this.
What's going on? You were at this beautiful scene for the meeting, and you said a lot about acquiring Canada as a state. Did anybody talk to you about that, and where are you now?
Much better deal from Canada, but it's up to them. They're going to have to pay a lot of tariffs and things. They're going to have to pay a lot of money for the dome, for the Iron Dome. They want to be a part of it. So we may make a separate deal on that, by the way. We discussed that, for the dome. That may be a separate deal. They want to be at $71 billion. They're going to pay.
There could be a dome thing separate from the tariff.
In the dome, they'll be under the dome.
Yeah, one of the things that we are seeing from Prime Minister Carney since the G7 is that Prime Minister Carney and his government are now threatening additional reciprocal measures against the United States. So I wouldn't exactly call this a very successful G7 from the perspective of United States-Canadian relations. But then again, everybody was warning Prime Minister Carney about how absolutely despicable the gangster, sexual abuser, criminal, felon, bankrupter Donald Trump would behave. Donald Trump just can't conduct himself as an adult. So here are the messages coming from Prime Minister Carney's government. Today, we announced new measures to protect our steel and aluminum business and workers, including adjusted counter tariffs, reciprocal procurement rules, and tariff rate quotas, specifically on certain steel products. Canada's steel and aluminum industries are world class, and they deserve a level playing field. While we work toward a deal with the U.S., we're taking strong, targeted action to defend our workers, uphold fair trade, and build the strongest economy in the G7. Here's Prime Minister Carney saying that Canada is now imposing a 30-day deadline on Donald Trump, and then Canada will take significant action against the Trump regime. Here's Carney. Let's play it.
In parallel, we must reinforce our strength at home and safeguard Canadian workers and businesses from the unjust U.S. tariffs that exist at present. And that's why we're announcing that Canada will be introducing a series of countermeasures to protect Canadian steel and aluminum workers and producers. And there's several, and I'm going to list them. First, Canada will adjust its existing counter tariffs on U.S. steel and aluminum products on the 21st of July, at the end of that 30-day period. In other words, we're going to adjust them to levels consistent with the progress that's made at that point on the broader trading arrangements with the United States. Secondly, we will implement reciprocal procurement rules, ensuring that only Canadian producers and producers from trading partners that provide Canada with tariff-free reciprocal access through trade agreements can compete for federal government procurement of steel and aluminum.
And here's Prime Minister Carney being asked a question about these reciprocal tariffs and about Donald Trump's behavior at the press conference he held yesterday. Let's play this clip.
We're willing to sign a security and economic or commercial agreement with the United States that's in Canada's best interest, and only that. So that's the negotiation. That there is still some room to travel, so to speak, before we get to that point. But we have a deadline in order to achieve that. And if it's in Canada's interest, we'll sign it. If it's not, we won't.
So you're willing to sign a deal with the Americans and still have some of the tariffs that Donald Trump has signed still in place?
Ça dépend. It's a negotiation right now. I was anticipating the en français. Sorry, yeah, it's a negotiation. We start from a position which is clear in terms of the tremendous contribution of Canadian workers, Canadian companies, first and foremost to jobs and livelihoods here in Canada, but to the competitiveness of the American, for example, specifically in the auto sector, where steel is and aluminum are so tightly tied, and our auto companies are so tightly tied. We are part of the core that makes American automakers competitive. It is in the U.S. interest as well. They have to fully see that.
Now, I want to remind you as well that when Donald Trump arrived at the G7 in Alberta, Donald Trump started praising Vladimir Putin, attacking the concept of the G7, saying that it should really be the G8, how much Putin loves him. Putin loves me. Putin only wants to talk to me. Then Donald Trump started attacking former President Biden. He started attacking Democratic cities in the United States and was saying awful things about blue states and blue cities, by the way, who subsidize the red states and the red cities, right? I mean, California has the fourth largest GDP in the world, if California was a country. So California literally subsidizes the red states. You know how Donald Trump likes to lie and say that the United States subsidizes Canada because Donald Trump doesn't understand the way trade works? Well, of course that's false, but California literally subsidizes the red states in these United States of America. So Donald Trump was behaving so disgustingly and such like a petulant child that Prime Minister Carney had to literally shut down that press conference and say, I'm exercising my role as chair of the G7, and we're stopping this press conference now because Trump was behaving awfully. Here, play this clip.
All Democrat-run cities, and they think they're going to use them to vote. It's not going to happen.
That's it. Thank you. If you don't mind, I'm going to exercise my role, if you will, as G7 chair, since we have a few more minutes with the president and his team, and then we actually have to start the meeting to address some of these big issues. So
thank you. Thank you, media. Let's go. Thank you. That's it. That's it. Thank you very much. Out. Good. Go, guys. Out. Gotta go. Thank you. Katie, let's go. They don't want to. Thank you. Okay.
Mr. President, are you seriously considering trying to out?
Let's go. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go.
Now, let me share with you this clip right here. Friend of the MeidasTouch network, Charlie Angus, reflected on what went down at the G7, how Donald Trump behaved at the G7. Here's what Charlie Angus had to say. Charlie, take it away.
Hi, this is Charlie Angus. I'm here in Oshawa, Ontario. This is auto country. General Motors have been here since the 1930s, and this is the front line in Donald Trump's attempt to break the economy of Canada. So if there was ever a place that was hoping that we'd get a deal worked out at the G7 between Prime Minister Carney and Donald Trump, you'd think it would be here in Oshawa. But people in Oshawa are no dummies. They know that the word of a gangster can't be trusted. So let's just break down what happened at the G7 when Donald Trump came to town. Well, first off, he did what Donald always does. He made this vague promise that there would be a trade deal possible. And of course, all the media got all hopeful and thought that he was going to, become an adult and we'd all work it out and we'd become friends again. But Donald Trump is not our friend. He came to the G7 to insist that Vladimir Putin be allowed back into what was then the G8. And he falsely blamed Canada for kicking Vladimir Putin out. Vladimir Putin was kicked out because he invaded Ukraine. Donald Trump made falsehoods on behalf of Vladimir Putin. He came to deliver Vladimir Putin's agenda as a loyal sock puppet. And then he left the country because he didn't want to be in the same room with the real leader, President Zelensky. So again, we have Trump defending Russia, undermining Ukraine. Trump's reason for leaving, he said, was the situation in the Middle East. Now, normally, an American president would have used the G7 to show leadership, to be front on stage with the world's allies trying to de-escalate the situation. But Donald Trump doesn't see France, Germany, the UK, Canada as his allies. His allies are the gangsters, Vladimir Putin, Benjamin Netanyahu. And in the situation in Iran, which is becoming a very, very, very dangerous dumpster fire lit by Benny Netanyahu, the leader who believes in permanent war to stay ahead of his own courts, Donald Trump has now poured gasoline all over that act of arson, claiming that America will only accept unconditional surrender from Iran. Those are very, very provocative words. Those words were used in the Second World War to take down the Nazi regime and the militaristic government of Japan. There have been many historians who said that that language drove that conflict longer and led to many more casualties, and it led to the dropping of the atom bomb. So when Donald Trump says he's going to insist on unconditional surrender of the Iranians, that is a very dangerous provocation. And let's think about what he decided in making this decision. He ignored American intel. American intelligence said that Iran was not in the position or was making a nuclear bomb. But Benny Netanyahu needed a reason to bomb, and so Donald Trump sided with Netanyahu. And there's only one thing we can sense out of this, is that if Iran wasn't getting a bomb before, they're going to get one now. This is a very, very dangerous situation, and Donald Trump has set himself apart from his so-called allies and sided with the gangsters. But let's go back to Canada and this promise of a trade deal. Like all the other promises of a trade deal, there was, nice words. And then Donald Trump, when he went back to the safety of Mar-a-Lago or safety of Washington, said that Canada was going to face billions in tariffs unless we gave him what he wanted. And he said, or we could become the 51st state. So he's not backed off in his attack on Canada. He's not backed off in saying that we don't have a right to be a nation, sovereign and independent. And he is continuing to use this trade talk to try and break us and to make us a vassal state of his gangster regime. It's not going to happen, Donald. This is the front line here in Oshawa. People are holding the line. They will not give in to you because they know that if you give in to a gangster, he's going to keep coming back for more. The situation, my friends, is very, very, very concerning around the world right now. We are holding together by a very fragile thread all over the world, but we see that the gangster regimes are out to light a fire that could bring us all down. So my message is hold the line, keep the boycott strong, stand up for Canada, defend our interests because we can't trust Donald Trump. To our Prime Minister, we need to work with our allies around the world because the Americans are no longer our allies. They are now a major threatening force. I'm Charlie Angus.
And look, Charlie Angus predicted all of this, right? Remember, before the G7 took place, Charlie Angus was saying, Canada can't keep pretending that the U.S. is an ally. The U.S. is not. He goes, I get it, Carney. You need to bring the U.S. here. Just stop pretending they're an ally. Here, play this clip.
Canada can no longer view the United States as an ally. We know that Donald Trump doesn't believe in liberal democracy. He doesn't believe in the rule of law. Canada is an open and inclusive society. Little wonder that Donald Trump has denounced our nation as one of the nastiest countries he's ever had to deal with. And we'd be fools to pretend that his threat to, quote, get rid of the border by using economic force has somehow abated. We can't kid ourselves about the threat that's being posed by Donald Trump. Prime Minister Mark Carney is not inviting our nearest neighbor and friendly ally to join us in the G7. Prime Minister Carney is not inviting the leader of the free world to Canada. He is welcoming in Vladimir Putin's sock puppet.
We're seeing similar things in Australia. And it's interesting because some of the conservative press in Australia, what's up to all the Meidas mates out there, the Meidas down under? The Meidas fans in Australia refer to themselves either Meidas mates or Meidas down under. But as you know, your conservative media in Australia view it as a fail that your Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, did not meet with Donald Trump on Tuesday during the working session because Donald Trump fled on Monday. But to me, the common sense is not Anthony Albanese's fault that Donald Trump is literally a baby, right? I mean, Donald Trump doesn't know what AUKUS is. Donald Trump doesn't know the Australia, UK, US deal. Phase 1, phase 2. Trump has no clue what AUKUS means. Remember when Donald Trump was asked what's AUKUS? When he was with Prime Minister Keir Starmer a few months back, and Donald Trump didn't know what AUKUS even stands for. I'll just show you the clip so you can see it. Play this clip.
Discuss AUKUS though. We've been discussing AUKUS with the Australians and the Brits. Were you discussing AUKUS with the Prime Minister, sir?
What does that mean?
AUKUS, the Australia-US Defence Alliance.
Yeah, well, we'll be discussing that. We've had another great relationship, and you have too, with Australia.
Yeah.
We've had a very good relationship with Australia, please.
So how could you get mad at the Labour Party, or at Prime Minister Anthony Albanese that Donald Trump, like a baby, left? It wasn't just Anthony Albanese who didn't get the meeting with Donald Trump on Tuesday. Prime Minister Modi was pissed. President Claudia Sheinbaum was pissed. And many others who were there for the Tuesday working session didn't get to have adult conversations with Donald Trump because he's a baby. But, here, this is what the Sydney Morning Herald opinion piece said. Albanese is pulling away from the U.S. and Australians seem to love it. That was dated June 19, 2025. And just here's the thing. And I would say this to Anthony Albanese. I would say this to Carney. I would say this to any world leader as someone who's been studying Donald Trump, right? Trump is a weak, pathetic loser. Taco, Trump always chickens out. Mr. 2 weeks. I'll decide in 2 weeks. I'll decide in 2 weeks. Trump doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Okay. He's a scared little petulant toddler. Just stand up to him. You stand up to him. You bully him back. And you can't cut deals with the guy who breaks the deals. He's a deal breaker. He's a he's a walking breach of contract. He's a walking, talking fraud. As I said at the outset, and this is why I love when Charlie Angus said this, you're dealing with a sexual abuser, right? You're dealing with a felon. You're dealing with a fraud. You're dealing with a literal gangster, an actual criminal. You can't do deals with the guy. So over the next 3 years, you got to make deals with other countries. You got to protect your interests, but you can't expect that this guy's going to ever behave in good faith. And you can't get upset at someone like Anthony Albanese for not meeting with Donald Trump. Trump was the one who left like a baby. What do you want Albanese to do? Follow him back to DC? Please, Mr. Trump, please, Mr. Trump. Come on, get real. Anyway, hit subscribe. Let's get to 5 million subscribers. Thanks for watching.
Can't get enough Meidas? Check out the Meidas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts, daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, and more. Sign up for free now at MeidasPlus.com.